Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? You know, a lot of times people will comment on my videos and ask me questions. And some of these questions are interesting or intriguing enough that I figured I really should make a video response rather than just typing them out. And so I've had a bunch of questions on deck that I wanted to get to, and I just haven't had a heck of a lot of time. And this question came up, and I put it to the front of the line. And I did it because it made me smile. It was really intriguing, really interesting, and it reminded me of something that maybe remind you of it as well, that I've talked about quite a bit, that seems to pop up independently on its own, despite the fact that many people are very opposed to the fact that it might exist. So I'm just going to leave that where it is, but let's go to the question here. And this question is by Sean O'Farrell, if I didn't mention that already. And he said, "Hey Ivan, I'd be interested to hear your opinions on a question I've been putting out to my role-playing community recently. What do you think should determine the mechanical difficulty of an action or task in a role-playing game?" And he goes on to say, well, difficulty could be the chance of success, the cost of improvement, or the investment required to unlock a particular ability. So our question really is, what do you think should determine the mechanical difficulty or cost of an action or task in a role-playing game? And he went on to say that generally he got a bunch of answers, but they seem to gravitate around or center around 4 different answers. And he said most people have answered that they prefer some sort of a mix. However, they all have a bias towards one particular measure, which is not surprising. So what's your preference, Ivan? So I'm going to mention these 4 different categories that he put out and then talk about them a little bit. And we'll see if I can come up with any sort of bias or preference. And, you know, a lot of this relates to playing on purpose. It's not surprising that people tend to gravitate towards a particular intention for play. Sometimes they just always have that intention for play. It's kind of their default setting. And sometimes, depending on what the game is actually supposed to be about, what the experience they're looking for, they may change this. But anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself. What are these 4 categories? What do you think should determine the mechanical difficulty or cost of an action or task in a role-playing game? Number 1, fictional difficulty. If something should be difficult in the fiction, then it should be difficult in the game, mechanically. Number 2, mechanical benefit. The more powerful the effect of a particular action, the harder it should be. Less likely it should be to happen. Number 3, narrative merits. The chance of any given outcome should be proportional to how interesting it is. Okay? And number 4, social convenience. Actions which can harm the overall enjoyment of the group, causing stress, offense, conflict, etc., are more difficult. So let's talk about these. First of all, number 4, that's the odd duck. I don't really believe that this or belongs in the list, and based on the question that difficulty should be the mechanical difficulty of an action or task in a role-playing game. Now that's a little bit bizarre because that's a session 0 thing. That's when we have a social contract and talk about what is or is not on the table, where we have things like lines where this is simply not going to be in the game, or veils where this can be part of the backdrop of the game. You know, maybe it's something that's just kind of disturbing that's going on, but we're not going to talk about this. You know, we just know it's happening because there's no need to really go on ad nauseum about all the nasty things that the bad guys or whatever are doing. Maybe it's something like a game like Tech Noir, which simply says, listen, you're going to make noir characters. If somebody brings the wrong character to the table, the game master says, nope, this is not working, that sort of thing. But to put it on the mechanics themselves is a little bit bizarre. That's saying that, hey, you know what? These particular things are off the table unless you roll double 6s on 2d6. So 1 in 36 chance of like something really nasty or something that's going to break up the group is going to happen. That doesn't make any sense. So that really doesn't belong in there. That's wanting the mechanics to do your job for you as an adult and having a social contract and coming up with some kind of agreement. So anyhow, that's my opinion on that. So that leaves us with 3 different intentions. And I think it's important to consider like your primary intention, or what should be the primary thing that determines the mechanical difficulty or cost of an action or task in a role-playing game. Because yes, it's true that there could be a little bit of a mix, but generally, I think always, you come with this primary intention for, why should something be the way it is. So I think it's a little wishy-washy just, talk about the fact that, it's a mix. That's my personal opinion. Anyhow, so we've got fictional difficulty. If something should be difficult in the fiction, then it should be difficult in the game. It's very interesting here that he didn't say realism. If something is realistically difficult, then it should be difficult in the game. And this instantly makes me think of genre. And you can look, I'm not going to talk about the various systems. I was thought about doing that, but it's really not important. There are various systems out there which emulate different genres. There are systems which emulate things that are very gritty and very realistic, and your chances of success are equivalent to your chances of success in real life, there are a lot of other systems which emulate pulp heroics in one way or another, and they all have different ways of doing it, because you think of the stories, the movies, whatever, the whole pulp heroic feel, and these systems run the gamut from being very pulpy, you know, or little pulpy, to extraordinarily pulpy, to like people can do unbelievable things, but it mirrors the fiction. If the game is really well put together, the system really matches the genre. It mirrors what would be fictionally difficult, and often what's easy in the fiction for characters to do becomes easy for your character to do. It allows you to become immersed. It doesn't break the suspension of disbelief. Okay, my bias is already showing. Anyhow, or my primary intention is kind of showing a little bit. That really is the one that, yes, I would gravitate towards. So, spoiler. Second one is mechanical benefit. The more powerful the effect of a particular action, the harder it should be. That crops up in games all the time. It's very hard to roll an 18 when you're creating a character in basic Dungeons and Dragons. So that giant mechanical benefit doesn't show up very often. There's, most systems have some kind of probability or sliding scale of probability where the really giant mechanical effects, well, they're not very probable, or if you want to buy them with some sort of resource, they cost more. The more effective it is, the more it costs. That's not anything groundbreaking or new. That tends to show up in most games. However, I think it's important to determine the primary effect. What should be the primary thing that determines the mechanical difficulty of an action or task in a role-playing game, or the cost of this action or task, or whatever thing. If you're going for the maximum mechanical benefit, you start to have this preference or intention for play of kind of a win state, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to make that really clear. But that kind of really illuminates the idea that you're looking to win. You're looking to step up and play the game. Once again, nothing wrong with it, but that kind of illuminates or shows a primary intention. And the last one, these narrative merits. The chance of any given outcome should be proportional to how interesting it is. And there are plenty of games I've talked about recently which have mechanics which, if you break them down, the most probable things that are going to happen is something that's rather interesting. It's going to be success with some kind of complication. It's going to be failing forward. It's going to introduce some new stuff into the fiction. It's not going to be simply you fail and nothing happens. There's a whole bunch of indie games and other systems based around that. And once again, that's great. That can be something that I want to have happen in normal play all the time. However, the idea, the primary intention, when you're determining your dice mechanic as a game designer, or if you're looking at various games as a person that wants to play a game, and you're looking for, I want the most probable thing, the highest level of probability is when something really interesting happens. That instantly shows a preference to what your actual primary intention for playing the game is. So, not surprisingly, even though I don't know that these people that Sean actually interviewed were thinking about a game theory, it's not surprising that those answers tend to pop up. So anyhow, that's my take on that. I kind of have a primary something I gravitate towards that I think for me is the thing that I like to determine the difficulty of a task or action. But I can understand the other ones as well, and certainly there are times that I play a certain game when I gravitate a little bit more towards another one because that's what the game is about. Anyhow, so that's my answer. But what about you? What do you think should be the primary thing that determines the cost, the difficulty of a task or action?